Keep track of you.
Here.
Was that not fire? Maybe we should just, I don't want to be the kid that always says something, but maybe he just doesn't know. Maybe we should move it to clean.
Self-expected chapter. Okay, how's everybody? Let's see this move. How is everybody? Any troubles? Any concerns? Anybody's finding some before we get started? Issues? Again, now towards the end of the semester. I'm sure you can see C# is a really deep subject. Right? There's a lot to learn, and we have learned a lot and still feel like we're just scratching the surface sometimes. One of the students in one of the other classes I talked to the other day, and he asked if I had advice on, oh, I'm falling apart here, how to stay motivated here at the end of the semester. And I said, you know, I know it's hard. It's difficult. Difficult for me too. So I said, you know, often in a normal semester, I would ask some previous students to come in and be guest speakers. And I haven't done that this semester because of COVID and all of the other problems. But I can point out one little thing that one previous student has mentioned in the past. And you know, we don't like to ask people when they come in or when they're on Zoom even how much money they're making. They said, but I do want to tell you that I know there was a student, and this is a special student. I mean, not everybody is going to make so much money, but this person, when he started out of college here at OTC, he started at a company making $60,000 a year. Now, he had an internship that was paid, and they were very happy with him, and they offered him a permanent position. And he had an interview with another company, and he kind of was able to do negotiations. So he's a very effective interviewer type person. But that's how much money he started out making. And so, did you know, if we divide that by 12 months, well, let me get a calculator here. I was gonna do it on the big screen, and it's so early for math. And I don't really want to divide by 12. That would be easy math. Let me bring up the calculator. I'll change my view to normal here. So if he's making $60,000 a year, I want to divide that by 52 because there's 52 weeks in a year. And as programmers, I just want to make sure that's something that you've heard before. So there's 52 weeks in a year. So that means he's making about that much a week. So then if we think, well, there's 40 hours in a week, and we're used to comparing wages per hour when we work at hourly type jobs, which is, you know, kind of where a lot of students are. So if I divide that by 40 hours in a week, and of course he might work more than that, he might work less than that depending on the week, if he's a salaried person, that comes out to about that much per hour. You guys have seen in the last few weeks, you think salaries are going to go up? Seems like it, doesn't it? It seems like there's just not enough people to fill jobs and not enough workers anyways. So it seems like salaries are going up. But in the meantime, that's a really effective hourly wage. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I was in college, that was enough to keep me motivated. because I would really like to be able to feed my family and do all those important things, which I can do with that kind of wage. So yes, it's hard, and sometimes there are difficult times. Sometimes it's really easy. But the truth is, in the end, you'll get compensated for your work and your efforts. So it'll hopefully make it all worth the time and trouble. And of course, here at OTC, we'll try to help as much as possible. Watch all of the emails. There's a job fair coming up, like next week. That's going to be one of the first ones.
I think it's the 5th, isn't it?
Is it something like, yeah, it's real soon.
It's Wednesday.
It's 5th. So if you find it, post the email to our teams or whatever, because there's going to be like 100 employers there, because there are so many employers that are looking for people right now. So even if you're not in the job market, it might be interesting just to attend and see what it's like, you know, what kind of things happen. Watch people, you know, as they approach the employer booths and give them their resumes and stuff, so you kind of know how that sort of thing happens. So it's not so nerve-wracking when you're doing it for real. Okay, let's update here. So yeah, sometimes it can be hard to stay motivated, but it'll be worth it. For me, it definitely was. I know when I was in college, there were times that my husband and I had biscuits and jelly. I don't know about you guys, it wasn't the greatest of meals, but there were many days that we had to survive on those. And we did, and we made it, and it was all worth it in the end. So at least there's a goal. It's like that OTC commercial. It's good to have a goal. So if you're having trouble or having any sort of concerns, let me know, let somebody else in the class know, because we are coming up towards the end, where we want to make sure that things are clicking in place. So today we want to do some file access, and I wanted to add a file open dialog box to our menu app that we were working on last time. So I put a zip file of the menu app in our Teams code channel under files, in case you weren't up to speed with us last time or weren't here. I made it a zip file, so I'm hoping that that will download from OneDrive better than me just uploading the whole folder and letting OneDrive turn it into a zip file. I don't know. We'll see, because I haven't been very happy with the way OneDrive is responding to guys when you download stuff. I know it's kind of a weird deal. So let me know if you're having trouble getting that. Before we start with our code, though, wanted to think about what actually happens when we are reading and writing text files or sequential files from our file system. These files are sitting out here. I use a fancy file icon. So I might have some text file sitting out here that has some sort of information that I want to read. So in order for me to use that file in my program, I need to open it. So I always have to open a file before I can do any sort of processing with it. Then I need to read the file. Within our file, we have many rows of data. I'll put that over here kind of as a picture. So I have some data, a bunch of data here. In our case, maybe we have a bunch of different albums, information here in our rows. These are records. So I want to read all of these records into my program. And I might want them one at a time so that I can handle all of the data in each one. Or I might want to read the whole bunch of them into some sort of array or something like that. I can do those. I can do all of those things however I want to. So I can process then each of my records. So when I do a read, I will check to make sure I got a record. When we're working with files, sequential files, we call the end of the file EOF for end of file, really scientific. if we're at the end of the file, then we're going to do something like end our program. If we're at the end of the file. If we're not, we're going to process somehow that data that we got, and then we're going to go up and read again. And so we're just going to keep doing that loop depending on how we're processing our file until we're all done. Once we're done to file, we'll end our program. Now, one thing that has to happen though, when we end our program, we have to make sure that we close our file. If we leave our file open, there's locks established by the operating system that are still in place. And so we might not be able to access that file properly in other programs, or other users might be affected. So we always have to make sure that we open files, we read them in some kind of loop, read process loop, and then we close our files when we're done. So that's what we're going to do with reading our file. We'll share a little file here with everybody here in just a second. So things that we need to get. First of all, we need our program. I'm going to open Visual Studio again. And I could do it either way. I could continue without code and go to TFS. Let me see if I can get connected here. Oh, it looks like I'm connected to TFS. I think I had like L14 menu or something. So I'm going to look at my Source Control Explorer and find that L14 menu project. There it is. And I'm going to double click on my solution to open it. Now again, if you don't have the project, go to Teams, to our code folder, and download that zip file. Make sure you extract that zip file before you open it. Now that should have opened the project for me. I need to switch to Solution Explorer to find it. And sure enough, there's my project, but it's all rolled up. So I'm going to unroll it, double click on my form to open it. There's some sort of wreck or something out there, you guys?
Not that I saw.
But you were so late. There's some sort of wreck or something. Made you and Ethan be 15 minutes late. Nothing, huh? So we've got our project open. Let's go ahead and get started with it. Didn't know if we had some sort of bad traffic out there. Guess it's tomorrow. We're supposed to have bad weather, isn't it? Let's take a look at our project. What was this thing? Do you remember? It's been several days, so it'd be hard to remember. Now, I went through and I expanded my solution in Solution Explorer, and I double clicked on my form so that it would open in design mode, because somehow, for some reason, when we're working with our GUI forms-based apps, it just makes us feel better to be looking at that form when we start out. It's not necessarily code, but that's all right. If I want to find my code, I can real easy. I could right click on my form and choose view code. I could press F7, double click on it in Solution Explorer. Whenever we're working with a forms-based app, remember we have a partial class. We have our form class split between our form CS file, and if we expand that, our form designer CS file, that's all that Windows generated code that we've taken a look at a little bit of time. So we have a lot of stuff going on here. In our application, we created just a few event procedures, methods, If somebody clicks on our exit menu, we want to exit our application. If somebody clicks on our about menu, our help about, we want to show our little about form. And then we had a message box showing where we were with that. And if somebody clicks on our font, we're showing the Windows Common Dialog font control and letting people pick their font preferences. And then after they pick their font preferences, we're updating the font on this little text box we put on our form. So we were working on our file open last time. We saw that we could use a common dialog for the file open dialog, just the same as the font dialog. And we had gotten to the point where we were setting our default file name to be audio, and we set our default extension to be .txt. We were working on this filter, and we had a little bit of inconsistencies in our results so far on how this filter was coming out as far as just showing .txt files in the open dialog. So that's kind of where we have left off. We put in an if statement that we want to make sure that when the user has completed the file dialog, they didn't press cancel. And we're trying to save that file name that they gave us. Let's run this and kind of remember what it's like and see if everybody's got it to work. Your form should come up. You should be able to do your file open. And you should see that Windows Common dialog, the file open pop up. Your default file name should say audio, and down here on the bottom, you should have just text documents being displayed. And we could update that. Justin, is yours still being weird?
Yes.
Okay, great. At least it's being consistent, right?
Right.
And so we could pick on a text file if we wanted to. So great job, we're in really good shape. I'll pick this test value .txt file and try to open it, and my message box shows my complete path name to that text file that I was trying to open. Okay, so great. We need to have some data to do something with. And we had a week or so ago, remember we created that listbox form where we showed all of the entries from our little database class? What if we kind of try to do the same thing, only this time we'll read all of our album information from a text file instead of having it be generated by our database class to generate test data. So we got a lot to do. So that's where we are. Let's close out of this. Let's get started. Now, every time we've needed to use our class file, our compilations class file, I've had to go copy and paste it and get everything all copied and pasted into a project. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. And there's something else that we can do that's a little bit different. This is a sort of an advanced thing. And I have really gone back and forth on whether our time is well spent, but I think it is. So open Visual Studio again. Down on your taskbar, right click and choose Visual Studio again. And instead of us just copying our class file into our project, let's create a class library. And that'll be an executable version of our compilation class that we can just bring into our project without copying that source code. So let's create a new project. And this project type is something that we've never used before. So search for class, and what you'll find is class libraries. And I want to use a .NET Framework class library. So I know all of our form stuff that we've used so far has been not .NET Framework. So if I choose .NET Framework, we should be consistent with our .NET version. So I'm going to choose that and click Next. And then I'm going to give this class library a name. Now, I know we're always naming everything so far like L14 for what lesson we're on, but with our class library, we can maybe do something a little bit different so that it's friendlier as we copy this into our other project. So let's make this OTC audio app. And then that'll be the name that we'll be using to refer to this. Now I'm going to go ahead and create it. And the only thing that's going to be in this project, once it gets created, is a class file. So if we look at Solution Explorer, well, we still have our properties and references, of course, because it's a Visual Studio project. But we only have a class1.cs file. And I want our audio compilation class. So in Teams, if you go to Code, Files, I don't have it out here for you just straight. Hang on. If you already have it in another project, that's great. You can go ahead and pull it in from that project. I'm going to find it here and post it to Teams.
What is it that we're?
Compilation.cs. Can you look at copy this? There it is. So now if you look at Teams, under Code and Files, you should see that CS file. You can just click on it and copy and paste all that code, or you can download it and import it into our project. I'll just copy and paste everything. And Control C. Now, I'm going to select all and paste, but then I need to change my solution name. So a couple of ways I can do it. I can do it manually. This one we can, OTC audio. And I just want to make that solution name something reasonable because that's the reference we're going to use for this project to get to our compiled class. Now my CS file is still named class 1. I need to rename that because I copied and pasted this thing. So let me make it compilation so it all matches. Now this class is not going to be part of our project. Right now it's in its own project. We're going to build this thing so that it creates what's called a DLL file. That's a dynamic link library. It's basically machine code. And we can copy this in or add a reference to it in the project that we're working on. So we never have to look at this source code again. And the other thing is, if we share it with other people, we don't have to worry about them looking at it and modifying it because we don't want our class to be changed. But that does mean that I have to make sure that this class is public. So I need to add that access mode public to this class because it's going to be in a completely separate project that it's compiled in, and then we're going to use it in our others. All right, we're all ready then. That's all we need for a class library type project. Up at the top, we want to use our build menu. If we try to run this project, we'll just get a weird error because we don't have any main method. We don't have anything in here that's actually executable. So all we can do is build it. So let's build this solution. Perfect. Now, I want to go look at Windows Explorer at the folders for this solution and make sure that that DLL file got properly created. So right click on your solution and choose Open Folder in File Explorer so that we can go look at our project folder in File Explorer. Now, in File Explorer, I see my OTC Audio App project folder. If I open that, I see the standard project folders. The bin folder is where our executables go. So let's look in our bin folder. Inside our bin folder, we have two folders, our debug folder, which is what we're normally working on, and our release folder, which is where we would copy everything to if we were sending this project out for release to others. But I want to look at my debug folder because that's where I'm still working. And we should see a DLL. Do you see it? Did it make it? No? What you got?
It's empty.
It's empty. Is there something in your release folder?
Let me go back. There is no release folder.
So you only have the debug.
Yeah.
Let's see what's going on. Can you take over?
You can have just
Now, if you have trouble getting everything to work with this class library, that's okay. You can copy that source code into our project just like we have in the past. You don't have to worry about doing this class library, but I wanted you to know that you could. I thought we will just do it real quick, or try to. So what's inside that one then? In your debug folder?
It's empty.
It's empty. Okay, so show me your class back in Visual Studio.
You need to save it, okay?
Yeah, and why does that have an error? What's that?
Compilation. So I gotta change that in my.
Do we have two class statements, baby? Oh, delete that class 1 file. Or we should only end up with one .cs file here in our Solution Explorer. Just our compilation.
Oh, this one.
You have to like go to your project and like build it.
This one, there's two class statements, you guys. We can only have one. So we need to delete that second class statement. I would keep the public class, yeah. And then you probably have an extra curly brace at the bottom. Yep. That's from us copying and pasting. That's why if we generate this DLL, it's actually so much safer for us because we're not copying and pasting our source code all the time. Now build. That looks better. And down at the bottom with that output window open, we should see good messages about it succeeding.
Yes.
Now let's check your File Explorer and see if we've got that. There it is, yay. Anybody else with trouble? Is it working? Working? Cool, okay. Good job. Now, since we've got our compilation DLL generated, we can close this class library project. We don't need it anymore. We're going to use it. And actually what we're going to do in our project that we're working on, our menu project, we want to add a reference to that class library. So back in your menu project now, find references in Solution Explorer. And we want to add one. So on references, right click and add reference. In the reference manager, you might be currently looking at assemblies where you see all of these Microsoft things that could be added to your project. You might be looking at any of these different categories. We want to go to Browse. And then we want to click the Browse button. And we want to browse to our OTC audio project that we just created. Find it. Now it's down at the bottom of my list because I named it OTC. When I open the OTC audio app folder, again, I'm looking at my project folder. I'm going to go into my project folder, my bin folder, my debug folder, and find that DLL. And I'm just going to add its reference to this project. And click OK. Now, all along I've been saying, you know, we want to make sure that that our class is private where it needs to be and public where it needs to be and things like that. And this is why, because this DLL file is what we're really going to publish for other people to use. Now that we have that reference in our project, what if you were working somewhere and Walmart just gave this to you and said, this is the class file that you have to work with when you're communicating with us? Well, you can find out a little bit about it if you look at it in your references and you open it using the object browser. I right-clicked on it to bring up that menu, and I can choose View and Object Browser. This object browser doesn't look much different, but if you start expanding it, it shows us, oops, I'm not on the right thing. Oh, there I am. I always keep looking at the menu project that we're in. If you look at your OTC audio app project and expand it here in this object browser, it didn't come up with that selected, even though I asked for it to open with it selected. I finally get to my compilation class, and if I click on that, here in the middle of the object browser, I'll see, oh, here's all the properties for that class, and here are all the methods. So I can see how I can interact with that DLL. I see, oh, here's a constructor that's a default no-R constructor. Here's a constructor that requires all the data. So I can just kind of see what kind of information is in that class library that's been compiled and given to me. Do you see that? Any issues with it coming up? All right, we should be able to use it then.
I'm actually, I got to the point where I added it to lesson 14 menu, and I'm looking at the object and I don't see anything under the object.
Oh, okay, let's see what's going on. Take over and figure it out.
Right here. But it doesn't have anything more to drop down.
Is it what?
There isn't any more to drop down.
Oh, it's not letting you?
Just mine showing.
I stopped, see if it lets you know.
No. I mean, there is. I'm showing it. I think I'm.
Not seen it. Excuse me.
I have a full. I'm on the video. I'm not sure. Am I on the wrong one?
Yeah, you're not showing those.
Yeah, we're not seeing you.
I think he is, yeah.
Oh.
Are you in a
Are you
different
sure?
meeting? You show is in our meeting.
I can see his screen.
That's just not on the big screen.
You what? You can see it?
Yeah,
It's not showing it to me.
no idea. That's it.
Yeah, it says you're in mine.
Teams.
Some lines crossed.
Okay, guys, fix it for him then. There, okay.
There you go. We'll get right on that.
Sometimes Teams is weird.
All right, so I have OTC audio up in here, but there's no drop down to show my compilation, which is in.
It's not gonna let me out of this unless I pick one. That's gonna take over from him. Okay, share again.
Oh.
Sorry. Wouldn't let me see your stuff without messing it up. There we go.
So I have compilation.
Okay,
I believe I pulled it over correctly,
okay.
and there's nothing in there.
So let's look at your class library project. Did we need to make that class public?
Yes.
So if we don't make it public, we can't even see it in that object browser. Now you're gonna need to build it again. So this is a good opportunity for us to see. Cancel that, what, I'm not sure. You don't need to save as, we just need to build.
Do you have your compilation code?
Oh, yeah, I see what you're looking at, yeah. No one else's,
Second
hers
one,
wasn't,
Can you just say?
Why do we
you
have,
know what I mean?
we have, it's open
So that's what I was
twice.
gonna say, maybe like the
Can you
variables under the- I'm
Look
trying
at
to
that
troubleshoot
other tab that you
just in
have there,
general.
Logan.
The other tab is the 14.
Your object browser.
Yeah.
So,
See that? Yeah. I thought that was.
no, go back to your audio app.
Maybe that's not.
See the other tab? So you have compilation.cs twice,
Okay.
so we can only have it once.
We got the same thing.
Which one's our
I
good
mean,
one?
these
There
are
we
private,
go.
right?
So
Oh, you're
it's
just
still
public, or you get it, yeah.
kind of confused about having the two files, so let's save all.
It's really weird.
Now what are you doing?
Oh, your
What are you doing?
namespace isn't set there.
Trying to reopen it to see.
Why? That's why it's so messed up. Because
Well,
it's not sure what project you're looking at, because you've gotten it very confused. So you need to do a save all. Yeah, I mean, somehow it doesn't think that this CS file is the CS file that you had when it started out.
Okay.
So it wants to know how you want to save it. I don't know, I mean, I don't know what the right thing to do is. I would say start this project again.
Okay.
And build a new class library and copy it in there. And then just build it.
When we built this, she said class library, we just added a class, right?
Anybody else
It
having
wasn't
trouble?
Class library.
Need to get him?
No, it gave us one default class, but then we just control A, control C, or control V.
But it's just like adding a class before.
Yeah, it's like another
Okay.
one.
Just making sure what you want.
We can help if we need to,
Library.
Logan.
Yeah.
Huh? We can help if we need to.
I just need to recreate.
Restart it?
Yeah.
Okay. We can sure help. But whenever we're working with a project, remember, when we're doing things like that, copying files in and stuff, we have to make sure that we're being super controlled, because it's so easy for us to end up with the same thing open twice, where it's two different versions and we don't realize it is, but Visual Studio does, and it's like, I don't know, man, what do you want? You've got this file open so many times. Okay, so we added our reference. We can see the way that class looks in our object browser. Can we create an instance of our compilation? Okay, let's think about this. Let's back up here for a second. If everybody's got that DLL working in their audio app, that's a great progress. When we open a file here, we would like to read our file in, and we would like to have information about audio tracks. I'm going to send you a little text file, or actually you can just create it. Let's open Notepad. And in Notepad, we want to just create a little file with our album information. So we want it to be in this sequence. This is my first record in this text file. And I want to have my album ID first, and then a comma, and then my album name and a comma, and then the artist, comma, the number of tracks, our cost, and finally at the end that true false, whether it's a collector or not. So I just only have one record in this text file. We could put more. We're going to need more test data. But this is a good start for us. So whenever we have commas in between our data values like this, it's called a CSV, or a comma separated value file. It's just a text file. You might have worked with Excel some, like in your 101 class, where you imported from comma separated values or exported to. So it's gotten to be really common for us to use these comma separated value files.
Okay.
We're just holding this like compilation.
Let's save this text file.
Yeah.
And I want to save it in my actual project folder. I'm going to go to my project folder, my L14 menu, and just right there inside my project folder, I'm going to save this. I think we said in our code we were going to name it audio, didn't we? Audio.txt. That's the file name we were suggesting, so I'll name it that. Audio.txt. I'm going to save it. Now I'm just going to minimize that because I'll probably want to look at it later. But I should be able to see it. I can't see it here looking at my solution. If you go to Solution Explorer, up at the very top in your toolbar, we don't use the Solution Explorer toolbar very often, but one of the tools is Switch Views. Let's switch views to Folder View. And in Folder View, we can open our folders. We should be able to see that. I'm still not seeing my text file. What'd I do with it? Do you guys see yours? Maybe it's just not
Mine's
gonna
one
show up.
level before though. The
Oh,
second
it's
is-
up above. Okay, so let's switch back to our solution view. And not,
Yeah.
I'm not going to worry about it because we're going to have to move it anyway.
Okay. So long as we can see it.
So long as it's saved in your project folder so you can find it, yeah.
Mhm.
So we're ready to try to open and read our file. We could put all this code right here in our tool strip menu click event, but then it's going to be kind of bulky. So it would really be nice if we would just create maybe a method to open our file and process it. There might be other places that would be convenient for us to create methods too. So I'm going to leave this messagebox.show line of code here in my event procedure for our menu click. And I'm going to add, let's do file, we'll call this file process. And we're going to pass our file name, open file dialog 1, dot file name. So I better create that event procedure. If I look at where I am, my purple curly braces are my if statement, and my green are my method. So I'll go to the end of this method and create a new one. I'm going to call it file process. I'm going to say this is a void method because it's just going to create an array of all of our compilation objects that we read from our file. So speaking of which, whenever we start this method, we want to read in that file name. It's going to be a string. and I want to name it something a little bit smaller than open file dialog 1.file name, I'll name it file name. So now I should be able to start reading in my file, or at least open it. Whenever we're working with sequential files, we should always include a try-catch, because text file processing is error prone. Whenever we're reading a file like this, we are outside basically the control of our code. We're handing this off to the operating system. We're saying, go find this file and open it for me, or go find this file and get the next record for me. So we can run into problems. So we always want to be using try-catch code. So we'll start out with our try. Now, when I typed that try, I pressed tab, so it put all sorts of stuff in there for me. Like too much, so I'm going to get Control Z back a little bit, and I'll leave this code in here that Visual Studio suggested. So remember, try and then press tab twice if it doesn't do it for you with just one, and it'll generate all of that information for you. So if I want to read and process a file, gosh, it would be great if I had some code to look at. How about I go to Google? I'll show you what I searched for here. C# read a file. So I didn't have to do too complicated of searching. And the very first result is from Microsoft. How to read from a text file. Yep, that's exactly what I want. Now, when I look through this information, I see that in their first code example, which is great, they are using something here. They are reading all of the lines in the file. And they're reading all of the lines in the file into an array called lines. That's fine. That's a way to do it. I'd like to actually read a record at a time instead of just reading the whole file, because we need to do some processing with each record, because we want to make each row into an actual instance of our compilation class. So we need to process each one. Well, right above this example, there is a link that says, for an example, see how to read a text file one line at a time. That's exactly what I wanted. It's a pretty common thing to do. That's why they've got a link there for it. So I'm going to go look at that code. So really close to what we want to do. This is the code I'm going to be referring to. I'm going to set up just a couple of variables. I don't know if we even need this counter, but I'll go ahead and set it up as a variable since they suggest it in this sample code. Let's try it. Now, they don't have the try-catch, so we're going to put their code within our try-catch. So first, I need a couple variables outside of my try-catch. Come on, Visual Studio, let me type there. I want an integer for this counter that we're going to start at 0. And they suggest we have a variable named line. Put a comment on that. This will hold each record in the file. We want to use those terminology things that we're trying to remember. Each line in a file is considered a record. Now, within our try, we could put the import statement in for system.io. But it's kind of nice once in a while for us to use that complete path and remind ourselves that we can. So I want to create a new stream reader. This stream reader object is a thing that knows how to read text files. So I want to create a new instance of it, and I'm going to call it file. We have to use our new keyword because the stream reader is an instance. So it's going to be a new stream reader, and I want to include my file name in here. Audio. Oh wait, I can't just put audio.txt, can I? I need to use our file name that was passed to us. So we've got our file name that they clicked from that file open dialog box, and that's the file we're going to try to open. Now, if we get it open, we're going to process each row. So while our line equals file.readLine, so for each time we read a line, we're going to do the readLine command. After we read a line, we're going to make sure that we don't get a null value. So not equal null, and I need to have one more set of parentheses here. So while I read a line, as long as that line is not null, I want to do this while loop. As you look at sample code, you'll find lots of different ways to check that end of file condition. This is just one way to check to see if we're at the end of file or not. So here we're not. So let's go ahead and do something with our data that we read. Let's do a message box dot show, and let's show our line. I want to see if we got this far. Then we'll add some more code. Now let's check the rest of our try catch here. I'm going to leave this code to catch any exception as an error object named E. And then if we get an error, I do want to write line E, but I don't want to write line the whole thing. Let's do E.message. That's enough. And then we don't need to throw another exception. So we'll delete that throw. So what do we got here? All we had to do was allocate this string variable named line. And in our try catch, we're going to try to open this file. And then we're going to try to read it until the end. And each time we read it, we're going to do a message box show to see what we get. You ready to try it? Let's try it. We run. I want to use my file menu and choose open. And I'm going to go to my folder. My L14 menu. And there's my audio.txt file. So I'm going to try to open it. What'd you get?
How are we open, or what are we opening again? I didn't watch what you did.
Our
Mine wasn't opening.
audio.txt. That's fine. Our audio.txt. Now first, we had a message box statement in there to show us the full file name. So that's what I'm seeing here, my full file name. It's in my project folder. That all looks right. So I'm going to click OK. And now I see the actual data that it read from my file, because I have that message box.show to show what data it read. Did everybody see data from your file? Do you see data from your file? Yay, good job. Let's click OK. I want to take out some of those message box statements. All right, good job. Now, what we want to do with all of this data that we read is put it into an array. Remember, our database class that built test data for us built an array of objects, our compilation objects, and then we were able to use that as the data source for our list box. So let's do that same thing. I'd like to be able to access this array and build this array in many different methods. So I want to allocate it at the top of the class as a global variable. When I scroll up to the top of our menu class, remember we're seeing some information here. Let's add some comments. right above our public partial class, if you do 3 slashes, remember that'll give us the XML comment style that has the tags already created for us. We haven't been doing a very good job at commenting here at the end of the semester. Let's try to rectify that. In this application, we could say app, audio, inventory, app. Let's do our developer. Remember, you want to have your mark on your code until somebody says you can't. My purpose here is going to be to allow inventory of audio compilations. Our class here, we're working with a partial class, and the first thing that we have inside of our partial class, if we do the 3 slashes again, the XML style comment, this is our form 1 default constructor, right? So we could put commands and things in here if we wanted to, because this is basically our constructor. Before our constructor then is where we would want to identify any class level variables. So for our class, we want to know about these compilations. So we're going to use our compilation class, and it seems to be finding it okay from our reference that we added. So it turned the aqua blue color for me like it should, and everything looks good. So I'm going to call this my comp list, and that's all I'll have here. So our class level variables, we are allocating an array of compilation objects. We could go ahead at this level and allocate our array with that new keyword, or we could do it later. So let's put it on a separate line of code just to remind you that we could have this happening later in our code, but there isn't really any better places for us to do this in this application. We'll say, whoops, what did I do? My comp list is a new array of compilations, and let's say we're going to only allow like 10. Oh, it's mad at us, isn't it? It's like, you can't do that here. Well, can we do that in our constructor then? Because we really don't have a better place. Let's cut that and paste it in our constructor. Oh, it's okay there. It says you can't create that new instance, bless you, outside of a method, just within your class. So I have to do it within a method. So we'll just say allocate our array. So now we have this array of compilations allocated, and we're ready to read our text file and read all of those things in our text file and create entries in our compilation array, right? So whew, we're just bringing all these pieces together. Our new code that we're working on is down at the very bottom. So I'm going to scroll down to the end of our code. That's where we have our file process method that we just created. And in our file process method, we can now, instead of doing a message box here, let's create an instance of a compilation. When we work with our record, remember we have those comma separated values. So we need to separate all of those values that are within those commas so that we can put them into the individual data items for our compilation. So we're going to need to figure out some way that we can use that comma character to separate all of those values. We've seen through different examples that you guys have done some really good string manipulation methods that are available. And we do have a string manipulation method that we can try to use. Let's create a temporary array here, string fields. We'll say this array called field is set up by taking that line that we've just read in and using the split method. There it is. We can use the split method when we're working with a string. And with the split method, we specify what character we want to split with. Oops, it doesn't like my double quotes though. It says that, this is supposed to be a char data type. Remember, we have to use single quotes when we're working with a char data type. Oh, it's not at me. I'm going to have to allocate that up here. I'll say I have, oops. No, you know what I did? I do that all the time. Too much Python work. I need those square brackets on my data type, not on my name. Sorry about that. I always make that mistake. So now we're allocating an array called fields. And in that array, we're saying use the split command to split up this line. Every time you find a comma, add a new entry to this fields array. So in our messagebox.show, instead of showing the line, let's show fields index entry 0. So we should see that ID from that first album. Let's run and see. I'm going to do file open. Choose my audio.txt file. Get my message telling me what my full path name is of my audio text file. And now I should see my first field. Did it work? Is that what you see? Got your field?
Scroll up.
Video okay?
It's in your, you're in your YouTube, but your view back. Yeah. Sort of like the menu solution. You're in the folder. Click on your references. And then scroll up. That's where your OTC like compilation should be, but it's not. Or your menus. How's it just running forward that?
So what can we do? We've got all these. Oh, yes, sir.
I've missed getting the compilation over to, I have it linked, but I'm not sure. I can see the compilation most now, but I can't.
Oh, let's see what you got.
I think you have some problem with it.
Good job. Wait, okay.
You just like open up like Notepad and then just save it in your file like what it is. Then you can just move it.
Can you see it?
No.
Where is it in there?
That's what
Go to menu. Just in
your
your
compilation
I
is
think
going to be in your
I don't
menu
know.
because you're not doing
Are you
right
here?
pressing the reference.
Oh, let me stop.
You're talking about the audio.
I don't know why it's being mean to you.
No,
It seems to let everybody
Yeah,
else.
but
It
the
must
audio
just
too,
be
that's just a Notepad.
because you're not on our
Yeah.
network. It makes sense.
So you've
All
been
right.
looking for the compilation CS file.
so
You said it's not in the
compilation.
private. That's
No,
why that's
It shouldn't be in this project, though, right?
I see it down here, but I'm not sure what to do with it.
Oh, awesome. That looks good. Okay, so let's go back to your code. And let's add a using statement. And if anybody else has trouble, you can do that. So let's just add using OTC audio app, see if it, and then put your semicolon, and that should clear up your errors. And I'm not sure why sometimes it forces you to do that, and sometimes it seems to establish the connections without. So if you figure that out, let us know, share with everybody, because I'm not seeing it.
And then did you have a text file somewhere for the first
So
album?
let's go up here. Do you have this stuff?
Yeah, I have all of that.
You got that? So what do you need? Sorry.
The text
The text
This
file.
one and this one.
This is our
The
menu.
text file that has like.
Okay, you can close this one. You can close.
So just put commas between all of your different values.
So you can. Mine just shows references. If you see audio.
Now, while you guys are waiting, you could go ahead and add additional columns to your message box or additional message box statements to see, you know, index value 1 should be your album name, index value 2 should be the group name. So see how that array of fields is being built from all of the different values on your record that are being separated out by those commas. Did you get it okay, Logan?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So once I do this line split, I could actually go ahead and create, there's so many different ways that I could do this. I'm going to go ahead and create an instance of a compilation. We'll call it compilation with a lowercase name, lowercase c, I mean. And we'll say it's a new compilation. Now, within our parameter list, we could use our fields without ever doing anything, you know, like I could say field 0 is the ID. I could have a comma. I could just do fields index value 1, fields index value 2. If I could type right, let's make that field. But if I do that this way, where I'm just putting each of the individual fields into our new compilation, what's going to happen when we get to our numeric fields? This is our number of albums, so we'll see if it pairs.
Have a string.
So what do I have? A ID, album name, artist, and now I'm starting to get trouble because my field index value 3 is my number of tracks, and that's an integer, and I can't use this string. Now I could put it within a convert method to int32. And I want you to convert field index value 3. So we could do that for each of our fields. It's kind of hard to say if that's a good way to do things or not. I'm going to comment this code out because I want you to consider that that's a possibility. But then I'm going to try it a different way. What if we create a compilation, and we just use our default no-arg constructor, and then we say compilation dot ID equals our fields subscript 0, and we set up each of our different data elements for our class that way. If you were a developer and you were coming in to work on this code, which code would you prefer? I can see benefits to either way. So that's why I want to show you both of them. Just remember, you know, you can do it however you like. I'll set up my artist. This is clearer because I'm actually naming each of these fields. Now I can do my convert. Top 2 and 32 on fields 3. I could do that within a try catch or do some sort of error catch if I wanted to now, some sort of error trap, where if I just do it directly within my constructor, I don't have the opportunity to do any sort of error trap in there. I would have to have that error trap within my constructor instead, which is also a possibility. Now I'm going to go ahead and do my cost. Our cost, again, we're going to convert that to double. That'll be on fields index value 4. And finally, our last thing is collector. Should be our 5th one. Now on that, do we have to convert that to a Boolean? Can we do that? Yep, we can. So every little thing, since we wrote all of those out to our text file pretty much as strings, we have to convert them back to whatever we need them to be. So that should be our complete compilation. So now we can add that compilation to our array. What did I name that stupid thing? My comp list. Now, as we are working with our list, we're going to need some variable to use as our index value into our list array. So we'll use this counter that we had set up. And we'll set that equal to this compilation that we just finished building. Now we'll add to our counter. Beautiful, so we have everything pretty well set. I think that we could run this and we could use the debugger and everything to make sure that our array is getting built properly based on our text file, or we can just go ahead and update our form to include that list box and add that one line of code in to set our list box to show this array. Let's do that. It's pretty simple compared to the things we've done. Go back to your form designer. And let's not worry too much about this album name text box that we have up here. We were using that for our font. We'll come back and fix it. But for right now, I'd like to find the list box. Is it in our common controls? Yeah, there's a list box. I'll put it down here, and I'm going to give it a name. List box compilation. Long name. Now in our code to connect those things, I'll view code. I think that the best place is back up at the top in our constructor, when we built our list of compilations, we can say that our listbox data source equals our my comp list. Now that's going to start out empty, so we're going to have to make sure it updates properly when we read our file. But that's all we need to connect those. So let's see what we've got. I'm going to run this. When we start out, we don't have any compilations in our list because our array is empty. So let's choose File Open and choose our audio text file. Full path name looks good. So it did something, I think, but I can't tell because it didn't update our list box. We could make it, force it, go back to your code, and here in your form constructor, let's move that line of code. I'm going to cut it. And instead of having it here in my constructor, I'm going to put it down in our code where we built our file access. I'm going to put it after our catch. Let's see if that makes it work properly. That's not exactly a final solution, but hopefully it'll be enough that we can see our data. Let's try running that again. Because it's at the right place now instead of being before we've built our array. We'll tell it after we've built our array. Open it. Yeah. Ah, now we can see our data. So we have a little bit of investigating to do. When we updated our array, it didn't automatically update our data source in our list box. We can probably handle that okay. Because now we're seeing that we have our data. Does everybody have data in your list box? Can we get everybody fixed? No data. Let's see what's going on. Let's fix you all. We have all our time here is just to fix everybody. Okay, show us what you're doing. Let me stop.
Okay. It's looking like everything should be running right. Like my path name is right. There's just something about it not popping up.
Yeah, we moved that.
Let's put a
we moved this
breakpoint
data
right there
source
at the
line
beginning
down
of
here
that
instead
while
of
we.
your form, like up here. Or
Oh, very good.
Here?
I have mine looks like this. Mine says
That's
listbox
not the right line of
compilation
code.
dot data source equals.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Move that one
that's
back
all
up
it is.
into your constructor.
But you need to move that.
Good job, good job.
So,
So in your constructor up here, you still want to have
right.
that my comp list.
So that line of code needs to
Yeah,
stay
there you
in
go.
yeah.
So then you just erase
This
that
one?
erase that line. Yeah.
okay.
And scroll back down below your catch or whatever.
All right. I just got the
Perfect.
wrong line. Maybe.
Did you say listbox dot? It needs to be listbox compilation. Or unless
Oh,
you-
I named mine
Oh, yeah.
listbox comp.
Oh, you did. But that's not the same. We're not. I mean, unless you do like this. You know, this one. Like the name of this form.
Yeah, is list.
Okay.
I might just
That looks right. Let's go put a breakpoint down there in where that while loop starts. on that while loop, just over a little further into the gray bar.
Oh, right.
Yeah, right there. Now let's run it. Do your open. Never got
It
there.
doesn't get there.
So why is that? Let's see your method that's, oh, there it is. Right after you do that message box.show on line 63,
Uh-huh.
we need to add a new line of code. And we want to call file process
Oh,
and then pass it your dot file name.
okay. That's all.
Now let's see, that should help. You can get rid of that breakpoint in it. Perfect. Now we're getting some action.
Or,
And as you go through, if you wanted to run a breakpoint like that, you could check all of your different arrays. Just continue, and there we've got a data element. So we should be able to add more rows to our text file. Go ahead and add more albums to your file so that you can double check and make sure that you're getting all of the data. I'm going to try like ID02. Can't spell this morning either. I like this one because it's so long. It's good to have test data like that that's annoyingly long. We know from our other list box it caused trouble. Hopefully there's 12 tracks, even though probably more. It was $10 and false. And then I know you guys have got some good albums in yours. I'm going to save that. And I'm going to run it again. Find my file. Make sure I've got it. So that looks good.
And did you use the text box for that?
A
What
list,
you got there was a text box? Or something
a
else?
list box.
A list box, I think.
We use the list box because the list box has that data source property
Yeah.
that we can point to our array and make it super easy. If you used a text box, you would have to do a for each loop to go through your array and add each of those array entries to your text box manually. But you could do that. That would be fine if you wanted to do it that way. So that looks good. On our forms, we've got a nice menu now. We have our file open, but we need to add that to our toolbar. Right now on my toolbar, what do I have? I have, if I click on my toolbar, oh, I do have open, and I did already associate that event-wise with the same method I was using for my menu. So I should be able to test that and make sure it all works now. I shouldn't have to do anything else, right? We got it all loaded up last time, so we should just be able to test it. So I'm gonna use my open on my toolbar, and it works. And now I'm gonna go to my audio text file, open it, and I still get my output. Yeah.
I had just thought about possibly implementing a most recently used file list. Like each time you open a file, it gets added to the list, so you don't have to go back through and find the file again through the dialog. And
Oh
show
yeah, you
this.
could do that. If you wanted to do something like
Yeah,
that,
I just don't know how to.
well, what would you do? Look at your open file dialog control. And
Should be something like
right now I'm looking at methods, so I need to switch back to properties. When I switch back to properties, there are things I could do. Now what Max is saying is we should default to like the last location. And we could do that. We would just have to set up a variable, like a class level variable at the top, a global one, that was like last file opened, and use that to save that file name. And then when you went in there again, you could use that. Let's try it. In our code, go up to the top. Microsoft. And let's add another
In your
variable.
text file, did you just like press?
I'll
enter?
add a private string last file name. And let's set our last file name equal to audio.txt, since that was sort of like our default. And then I want to find our file open. There it is, open tool strip menu. So instead of setting our file, oh, we need to say have two variables, don't we? We should have our file name and our extension. Go back up to the top. Last file name should just be audio. And last file extension. Variables are cheap. We can set up another. We want that to be .txt. And then I'll head back down there, my open, and instead of using these literals here within our code, we'll set them to those variable names. So last file name and last file extension. And really makes this a better way of doing it, because we never want literals like that in our code if we can help it. So that gives us a much easier way to maintain this too. If somebody comes in and says, we don't want it to be named audio, we want it to be named something else, we'd only need to change it up there at the very top, and then we'd have it taken care of. Now see if that works, because it may not give you all of the complete path name, but I think it will. Mine is defaulting to that, going back to the location where I was last at. So try it, do a little bit of testing. So notice how within our open tool strip menu, we decided it was better to have a separate method than to have all that code buried within that if statement. Look at your file process method now. And as we look at this method, does it seem like there's a logical place we should be creating another method? Does it seem like this would be good to have in another method, because we wouldn't be making it so hard to follow? I guess we want to minimize how much code we have in each method. We'd like for it to just be like a small paragraph that somebody can just look at real quickly. So let's think about how we could do that. We have a couple of minutes. Let's improve this.
I think
I'm going to come down. Do it.
I think the whole while should be a.
The whole while should be separate, right? And what we normally see is the while body is what we want to separate out. So we want to leave the while loop in our file process, but we want its body to be its own method. So I'm looking for my green curly brace again. That's going to be my end of method. And I want to create a new one. So I'm going to create a method here that's going to process each row. So we'll call it process line, because C# says we read a line, we made our variable line. Now, when we process a line, what are we going to need? We're going to need to know what was just read in. So a string named line. when we get done here, we're gonna have a really nice compilation built. So instead of making this a void method, let's say it's gonna return a compilation. Now it's complaining at me, it's saying, you don't have a return statement in here, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get it. So now let's get the code we need for this. I want from the beginning of my while statement body to right here where I've completely built that compilation. Let's cut that or drag it, however you like to do it. But I'm going to cut it, and I want to paste it into my new process line method.
We also need to pass in counter.
So wait,
We also need to pass in the counter.
well, we won't need to. Hang on. Now, at the end of our process line, we've built our compilation. Let's return it. Okay, so we've got this compilation now. How can we build that into our previous code? Well, right here, instead of using this compilation word, we need to say use whatever gets returned from our process line method, passing in our line. So now let's think about it. Instead of having all of that code within our while loop now, within our try catch, we've simplified really, and we've said, try to do this. Try to open the file, read it, and if you've got a row, process that line. When they return a compilation to you, add it to your array, my comp list, and then update the counter, then read another line, process it, add it to the array list. So notice how that kind of simplifies out our code to where we don't have to really pass too much information back and forth to that method. Can you see that okay? Let me zoom out just a little bit. And now if we look at our process line methods, it's really compact. It just does one job, just what it needs to do. It takes the line that we've read from our file, it splits it all up, and it returns it as a compilation object. That makes sense? Any questions? Notice how if we tried to do more in this method, we would make it more complicated and we would have to pass more data to it or from it. And if we try to do less, it really wouldn't be doing its job. So that gives us everything we need. So now we could really easily put this within a try catch. Again, it's still within a try catch because we're calling it from here. So let's see what would happen if we put in some invalid data. Let's add an album that has some bad data. With a text file like this, that would be very unusual. Because these have normally been tested a lot, embedded some album, some artist with an album. And then instead of saying a valid number of tracks, I'll just put some letters. So the only problem I have here with my third row is that my number of tracks, instead of being an integer, is a string. Now, I want you to see that our try catch should catch that because we're doing our process line within our try catch. So we've already got it covered. We're just not doing anything about it to handle it, but we could. It did. We just kind of ignored it, didn't we? But if we look at our output, somewhere, if I could see it. Let's see if I can view my console. Since we're in a Windows application, it doesn't show it automatically. I had to, in my view menu, find the output window because we did a console.write line if we ran into an error. And sure enough, there it is. Input string was not in correct format. So we did have our exception. We output some information about it and we just continued on instead of the operating system saying, hey, I'm crashing your program because you had an exception. So if we weren't within that try catch at that point, our application would have crashed with this error that it was a format exception. Okay, so let's take that bad data out. I'll just make it do something 7 so that I have another row and save it. Oops. Sorry. So our try catch is just catching everything. Anybody get any other troubles? Next time, what we'll do is write our output file. So if somebody were to enter in new pieces of information, we would write a file out. So we'll see how we can handle that. That's it for this one. We did some reading in of files. Really think about it, because sequential files, remember, are just like an old VHS tape. You have to process it from the beginning, read through all of the different records to get to the data that you want. Whenever we work with databases, then we have direct access like a DVD. So that's something for us to look forward to. But when we're working with sequential files, it's like an old VHS tape. We have to open it and read through each row at a time. So yucky. But good use. Now we can have some persistent data instead of us having to type everything over and over again every single time. We've got no questions. I'll set us off. Anybody got troubles? All right. Have a great rest of the Monday. See you Wednesday.
Ninja.